In the far reach of charted space, orbiting a lonely red dwarf, the mining outpost Xylan 7 had once thrived on its rich crystal veins. A bustling colony of multiple species, engineers, and families called its metal corridors home, until one day the comm channels went silent. When the distress beacons flickered weakly through the void, no official fleet bothered to respond. Just another backwater outpost marked for salvage, not rescue. But deep inside the shredded remains of Habitat Block C, amid ruptured bulkheads and flickering emergency lights, a tiny heartbeat defied oblivion. She was barely 6 galactic years old, a failing child, a delicate, cat-eyed race known for gentle songs and peaceful diplomacy. Her name was Sarah, though even she could barely whisper it now. She clutched a dented food container as if it were a holy relic, hiding behind crates, listening to the distant growls echoing through the ventilation shafts. Hours blurred into days. The monsters that tore through the colony's security drones now prowled freely, feeding on anything warm-blooded. Their claws scraped metal in the dark. Each sound made Sarah press her small body deeper into shadows, heart pounding against ribs so thin you could see them move. Her people were gone. Her mother's voice was just a ghost memory. Hunger gnawed, but fear drowned it. Sarah no longer wept out loud. Monsters hunted by sound. So instead, she buried her face in her thin arms and let the tears soak silently into her tattered tunic. Above her, the outpost's orbital ring shivered under seismic tremors. Mining accidents triggered when the beasts burrowed too deep. Power failed in whole sections. Oxygen filters clogged with dust and blood. And still, somewhere in that forsaken wreck, a soft, trembling child survived. No ships answered the automated beacon anymore. Pirates sometimes passed, scanning for salvage. None landed. The rumors of the monsters spread fast across the trade lanes. Nobody risked it. And yet, light years away, aboard a battered cargo hauler limping through the debris fields of Sector 9, a lone human pilot picked up the old signal on a broken console he hadn't bothered to shut off. John Hales, ex-Marine, ex-smuggler, ex-too-many things to list, frowned as static bled across his cockpit screen. He should ignore it. He needed fuel, not ghosts. But somewhere under the grizzled beard and cynicism, the embers of an old promise flickered. No one left behind. He checked his last jump coordinates, weighed the danger. Then he sighed, flicked the control stick, and plotted a course back to a place no sane trader would touch. Meanwhile, deep inside Xylan 7, Sarah dreamt she was safe. Warm hands lifting her up, soft words in a tongue she didn't know. She curled tighter in her sleep, too exhausted to hear the distant rumble of a ship piercing the cursed orbit above. In the dark, among monsters, hope began to flicker. It wore the rough face of a human no one would ever expect to be a hero. John Hale's battered cargo hauler shuddered as it broke through the outpost's decaying orbital debris. Chunks of fractured solar panels drifted like frozen sharks in the dark, scraping the hull with eerie metallic sighs. The autopilot begged for a retreat. John silenced it with a hard flick of his thumb. Inside his cockpit, a flickering beacon pulsed faintly on his cracked display. A child's life sign, so faint the system thought it was a glitch. John didn't believe in glitches that cried for help. He landed the hauler in the half-collapsed docking bay, its doors groaning like the dead as atmosphere hissed out around his boots. He donned a dented exosuit, strapped on an ancient plasma rifle that hadn't fired straight in years, and stepped into the stinking air of Xylan 7's corpse. Dead silence greeted him at first, until the outpost moaned alive around him. Distant shrieks, a metallic crash, the scratch of claws too big to belong to rats. John's pulse spiked, but the old Marine part of him slipped back into muscle memory. Check corners, keep moving, trust your gut. He followed the weak ping down rusted corridors, where lights flickered like dying stars. Blood trails told old stories of hopeless last stands. Security turrets lay twisted, their barrels gnawed and useless. The monsters here were no simple beasts. They hunted with sick cunning, luring prey deeper into shadows. Then he heard it, a sound so small it almost broke him. A whimper, a sob, the voice of someone who should never have survived this long. He knelt beside a locked storage unit, its door battered inward, but not fully breached. Inside, under the faint glow of a broken emergency lamp, huddled a tiny, trembling bundle of fur and feathers, eyes wide with terror, cheeks stained by silent tears. John lifted his helmet visor, ignoring protocol, ignoring the stale stench and the danger. He spoke gently, voice gravelly, but soft enough for a child to trust. "Hey there, kiddo, you alone?" Huge silver eyes stared at him, blinking once. She tried to speak, but only a faint squeak came out, then another sob. She pointed with a shaking claw to a tiny bracelet on her wrist. The universal med chip flickered. Sarah. John's throat tightened. He hated kids. No, he hated what happened to kids when grown men failed to keep monsters out. He touched her hand with a gloved finger. She flinched at first, but didn't pull away. Then the walls rattled. A growl rolled down the hall like thunder. The monsters had caught his scent, and hers. John didn't waste another breath. He scooped Sarah into one arm, securing her fragile body against the armored plates of his chest. With the other, he raised the rifle and backed toward the flickering exit lights. The corridor behind him split open, rows of teeth, scales dripping black fluid, eyes that knew no fear. John spat a curse and fired. The plasma bolt sputtered but found its mark, slowing the beast just enough. He ran, faster than he'd run in a decade, boot soles hammering rust and bone, Sarah clutching his collar, her tiny heartbeat thrumming against his armor. Behind them, the monsters shrieked in fury. The station shook under their rage. Ahead, somewhere beyond the shadows and the broken airlocks, salvation waited. John didn't pray often, but tonight he prayed for the strength to get her there alive. The corridors of Xylan 7 were a graveyard of broken metal and broken dreams, but for John Hales, they were a battlefield reborn. With Sarah clutched to his chest, he sprinted through half-lit passageways, pulse pounding in his ears louder than the monsters behind him. The little Phelan girl buried her face in the crook of his armored neck, muffling her frightened whimpers. John could feel her shaking with every guttural roar echoing from the darkness behind them. Each corner he turned felt like rolling dice with death. He paused behind a half-melted blast door to catch a breath, but the low growls slithered closer, claws scraping on steel. Sarah trembled harder, clutching a tuft of his suit with tiny claws. John forced a grin she couldn't see. "Hey, kitten, hang tight. We're almost home." He popped an old EMP grenade from his belt, a relic from wars no one remembered anymore, and lobbed it down the corridor. A crackle of light, a fizz of sparks, and the savage shrieks that followed told him at least two beasts had stumbled blind. No time to celebrate. His ship's auto defenses pinged him through the helmet comm. Hull breaches detected. The monsters were tearing at his only way out. He slammed his shoulder into the next hatch, forcing it open. Ahead lay the final service tunnel to Docking Bay 2. 100 meters. 100 meters of darkness and razor jaws between Sarah and the stars. He set her down just for a heartbeat, forced himself to look into her tear-soaked eyes. He tapped the translation patch on her collar so she could understand. "Listen, if I say run, you run. No fear, yeah? You're braver than any Marine I ever served with." She nodded, too stunned to do anything but believe him. A roar thundered behind them. The alpha predator, 3 meters of armored scale and rage, lunged through the shadows. John pushed Sarah ahead. "Now!" She darted like a frightened bird, bare feet slapping steel. John swung around, plasma rifle whining at full charge. He fired. Once, twice, the bolts hissed and popped, searing the monster's hide but not stopping its charge. The creature slammed into him like a battering ram. Pain burst across his ribs, helmet shattering against a bulkhead. He tasted copper, saw stars, but he held the rifle's sparking barrel against the monster's eye and pulled the trigger until everything smelled like burning bone. The thing collapsed, twitching. John, gasping, crawled through the pool in blood, vision swimming. Ahead, he saw Sarah at the docking ramp, pounding her tiny fist against the cargo bay controls. She turned, eyes wide, squealing in terror, as another shadow loomed behind her. Adrenaline dragged him upright. He stumbled, half blind, threw himself between Sarah and the beast. The last grenade at his belt felt like salvation. He ripped the pin, shoved it into the creature's snapping maw, and pushed. A thunderclap of fire and meat and darkness. When the world steadied again, he was on the ramp. Sarah's tiny hands tugging desperately at his sleeve, whimpering his name in her broken musical voice. Together they stumbled into the safety of the cargo bay as the outpost behind them groaned one last time, then fell silent forever. Somehow, breathless and bleeding, John managed a grin. "Told you, kitten. Nobody left behind." And with a hiss of hydraulic locks, the ship lifted them away from the graveyard of monsters into the waiting stars. He battered hauler broke free of Xylon 7's decaying gravity, well, just as the dying outpost shuddered with its final collapse. From orbit, the once bustling mining colony was now just drifting scrap, a tomb that would circle its cold red star for eternity. Inside the cockpit, John Hale slumped in the pilot's chair, one hand pressed against a cracked rib, the other steady on the thruster controls. Every breath burned like fire in his chest, but the sight of the stars overhead made the pain worth it. He turned his head, slow, careful, to look at the tiny Phelan curled up in the co-pilot's seat. Sarah had cried herself to sleep once the ship's safety bulkheads sealed them inside. She now breathed deep and even, hugging the greasy old mechanic's jacket John had wrapped her in. A child, a single frightened child, left to die in a monster's den, and somehow still alive. John let out a raw, quiet laugh that surprised him. "You stubborn little fuzzball, tougher than half the Marines I ever knew." He reached over, brushing a stray lock of fur from her forehead. She stirred, murmured something in her soft language, but didn't wake. For the first time in too many years, John felt like a soldier again. Not a drifter, not a burned-out relic, but a man who'd made a difference. The ship's nav computer beeped, fuel critical. Next jump gate, borderline range, medical supplies, laughably empty. He sighed, rolling his eyes heavenward. Always the hard way, huh, Hales? Still, he keyed in the coordinates for the nearest Federation outpost, with an actual doctor and a warm bed. He knew what the clerks there would say. A human smuggler hauling an orphaned alien? Paperwork nightmare. He didn't care. Let the bureaucrats bark. He'd keep her safe. As if she heard the thought, Sarah stirred again. Her eyes fluttered open, wide and silver in the glow of the console lights. For a heartbeat, fear crossed her tiny face, Then she saw him watching her and gave him the smallest, bravest smile he'd ever seen. John felt something break loose in his chest, something warm, something good, something he'd thought long dead. He winked back at her. "Rest easy, kitten. We'll get you fed, fixed up, and maybe one day teach you to fly this junk bucket yourself." She didn't understand the words, but she reached out a small paw and laid it on his scarred hand. A promise, fragile but true. She trusted him now. He squeezed her fingers gently. Outside, the stars spun slow and endless. Monsters and darkness fell away behind them, swallowed by distance and time. Ahead lay the unknown, new worlds, new trouble, maybe even a family if fate was feeling generous. John Hales grinned through cracked lips and pushed the jump lever forward. "Hang on tight, Sarah. Let's show the galaxy what a human and a tough little Phelan can do." And with a ripple of bending light, their battered hauler vanished into the endless ocean of stars, carrying two souls who'd found hope where there should have been none.